since 2012 I run Meeting C++. Before that I have founded the C++ user group, and I've been a freelancer before. So a short word on Meeting C++. It's not only a conference, but it's a bit driven by the conference. This year we have 300 attendees and 50 students. It's also a website for C++ and a blog for C++. It's also a platform for C++ user groups, and the goal behind it was and is building a C++ network. And in 2012, in 2013, I still was focused on Europe, and I think with a few other people which have joined us in this effort in the past years, like, for example, Jon and other organizers of user groups and community organizers, we can make this a worldwide goal, in my opinion now. And so, which brings me short to Mars. So you might have noticed the next talk after us is a keynote about C++ on Mars. So we send with C++ a rover to Mars, etc. I expect from that keynote, what about C++ on Earth? So what do we know about that? And if I zoom in a little bit, we see Europe, and we see Europe in 2011 with 2 active user groups which I know of. There's a few groups which are belonging to the ACCU which I have not listed. So the one user group which also was prior to 2011, I think, active is Oslo. They have become inactive in this year, I think, and my own user group. And then we go to 2012, and we already see we have twice as much. There is a Belgian user group Marcus here. They got founded in, I think, spring 2012, and then the Berlin C++ user group was actually a result of the C++ Now in Essen 2012, and then ongoing networking to get the user group in Berlin running, and that's how the whole thing in Germany got started. And now, if we go to 2013, we already see we have a few more user groups. So once people really saw that it's possible to get this into a reality, people started to actually try to organize their own user groups. We see in Germany, Hamburg and Dresden are now there. In Poland, one was founded, one in Sweden, one in London, and Joel Falcou has now also his user group running in Paris. And no, there's not a user group there's not a user group in the Mediterranean. That's a website which came up in 2013, I think, italiancpp.org, which tries to organize Italian C++ user groups. And that's also an approach which is run in a few other countries, that there is a central website and that they're trying to build an online community first and then trying to organize meetings around this. And if you go to 2014, we see suddenly we have a user group in Russia. They have a little bit of a different approach. They are actually organizing meetings in different cities, and so far they have been in those 3 cities, and now they're in a different city in Russia, Samarkand or something. And you see there's my own user group has this year split up into Aachen, Dortmund, Düsseldorf, and Cologne, and new is Istanbul, and there's now also an active user group in Madrid, and the Italian user group had their first meeting, which was not online. So if I zoom out again, there's also great point of activity in North America. There is a user group in Portland, in Las Vegas, in Chicago, and so on. There's a bunch of active user groups, and I usually try to list them once a month in a posting on my website. So if you run a user group, please make sure that at the beginning of a month your meeting is online, so I can include you in that posting, which goes out to the Meeting C++ network, which I will later be a bit more on details. But of course, the actually thing I want to motivate is to get your own user group running. So we probably should also talk about how you can get started. And those pictures are from C++ 2000, C++ Now 2012, I think. So I've prepared a little recipe how we can cook up a user group, and it's actually pretty easy. You just have to, mix those ingredients, and you have a user group, in my opinion. The first thing is that you need, of course, people, because without people you cannot meet, and you have to see a little difference between organizers and attendees. Organizers are people which are important to get it running, and attendees are important to keep it running, and not everybody is willing to give a talk or to be active, engaged in the user group. But this usually changes. So I've seen many people who have been attending for half a year and suddenly deciding that they want to speak on a certain topic or something. So, and then location, ideas and talks, of course, are needed, and get started as the last point. And I would like to get a bit more into detail about this. First, the motivation for user group is, of course, meeting other C++ people which are not, in your work and related in your problems, but, just maybe have similar problems in a different domain space, or have different problems in the same domain space, or can tell you something, about C++ on Mars, for example. So it's a very good place to exchange ideas, to exchange knowledge, and of course, a very important point also for me is that we can educate and reach with C++ user groups far more people than we ever can with user groups, with conferences, I mean. In my opinion, with starting a user group, the hardest thing is actually to find a person willing to do the organization. That's we would have a lot more user groups if that would be easier, because I know that a lot of people would like to attend meetings, but you need at least one person who's willing to organize it. It's a lot better if you have a group of people who organize it. So if possible, don't start alone. And of course, there's always also the topic where do you find those people? Of course, first and for all, your own network, like friends, colleges, and in your company. There's international, of course, the internet, social media, forums for C++ or local forums, and I'm also very willing to give you any support with Meeting C++. Meeting C++ has quite a reach into a lot of regions, and so if you're trying to start a user group, I can connect you probably to people in your region which you have yet not heard of. So, which brings me to the location, which is the second most important thing to meet at, and which actually, if you once have your user group running, becomes more and more important to have that. To just get started, to have a first meeting, a bar or a restaurant, can be very good to have a beer and share a good discussion. But also doing presentations and a lot of other things which we do at user groups is not that easy at restaurants, and especially if some do have extra rooms, but then you have the problem that you might have to pay rent, or that they expect a certain amount of money or of drinks being just consumed at that evening. And then you can have the problem that maybe somebody else wants a room at the same date and they're a better customer, so you're kicked out. In my opinion, a very good place to start is a hacker space. A lot of our user groups in Germany are running or have been starting in hacker spaces. Not all hacker spaces are really a good location for that, but I think so about 50% are, and it's very good for presentations. A very big advantage is that you already have a lot of technical interested people at the hackerspace, and there's a website called hackerspaces.org where you can find the local hackerspaces at your city. And I think I've prepared a shortened map of North America. So these are the active hacker spaces in North America. So in most bigger cities, such a thing exists. And if there's a hackerspace in your city, I think you definitely should pay a visit there. And even if you're not interested in a C++ user group, it's a very good place to meet very interesting people, which are also in the same interest of technical things. Another location is companies. It's not always the easiest to find a company willing to host a C++ user group meeting, so it's, in my opinion, not the best location, especially as companies usually also have agendas and the audience is not really liking marketing. So if you find a company willing to sponsor it, or maybe your company sponsoring the meeting room for that evening, that's quite good and quite okay. But you have to be careful, and you should try to start independent. So, and I know that, for example, the Belgian user group is mostly running their meetings in companies, and it's not that easy for you, Mark, or?
Actually, yes, there's a lot of interest.
Okay. Yeah.
But we always take another company, so it's not always the same one.
Okay. So yeah. So I mean, if you have the interest and if you have the chance to host it there, it can be a very good place too. So on the whole thing about what to do at a user group, one of the things I usually got to hear when I started the user groups, and I still hear it sometimes, is that you will run out of talks and you just will sit there and not know what to do about. And I'm sorry, that's just not true. I'm running my user group now for 3 years, and we have now for this year already the talks filled till December, and we could already probably accept the first talks for next year, but I refuse to do that at this point. Yeah, topics, I think C++, that's a bit, yeah. C++ 11, 14 are clear. Frameworks like the SDL, Boost, Qt, WS widgets are very good topics, and usually people bring their own topics, which they do at work, to present sometimes. So talks themselves are not the big problem. If you want to do something similar or something else than a talk, a coding dojo is a very, very good thing to do. It's also a very good thing to do at your company for training purposes, but it's also very fun to do it at a user group. And there's a website called cyberdojo.com where you can start and run your own coding dojo for an evening. And there's also a website called CppCquiz.org where you can play a funny C++ quiz with very good questions. And if you haven't heard about that website, it's definitely worth to visit it, and it's very fun to actually play around of C++ quiz there, either at a user group or somewhere else with C++ interested people. And the last point is that you actually should get started, and I think that's the most important point, because all plannings and all things are not really for not really happening if you don't get started. So once you decided that you want to use a group and you have people interested, find a first date to start and just try to keep it running. It's, in my opinion, the best thing to have a regular meeting once a month or once a quarter or once every 2 months, probably at the same date in the months, like second Tuesday or third Wednesday when my own user group meets in Germany. What you should also know is at the beginning, don't expect too many people, and fluctuation is quite common. So some people will only show up if they're interested in the topic, and some people will only show up once a quarter. And of course, one point which I also think is important, try to set up the next meeting at the current meeting. So if you meet, try to not let the people go without knowing when the next meeting is, so that they are directly informed and that they directly can put that in their calendars, and then are able to attend the next user group meeting and spread the news that there is in the next month again a meeting. And as I said, if you don't have a talk, then that's not the big problem. You still can organize that in the 4 weeks or in the 1 month or in the 2 weeks that's between that. But if you have a date and if you don't have a talk, there's still other options like running a coding dojo, which some user groups have so much fun with that they already, I think, 1/3 of their meetings are coding dojos or something, or quizzes or so. You don't have to do a talk at an evening to run a user group. This is also one point which I know today. A short few words about sponsoring. In this technical field, it's not easy to find. If you have a company which sponsors you as a host, that's a bit different, and that's, I think, probably the easiest sponsoring to find. As I already mentioned, that the audience does not like marketing. And you should always know that sponsors have an agenda, and so I've already had companies contacting me and that they would sponsor something like free licenses of their product, and that then I should give them the data of my user group. So I would have, people give me, so that I collect the data for them, and I'm a bit critical about that. And of course, on that point also, you should know that money can change your own mindsets and goals, and of course also the mindset of the audience. So even if there's no money involved, if people start thinking that there's money involved or that there is a big sponsor, that's something which can influence your user group without you even noticing it, because it's, for example, if you have a big company which is known hosting like Microsoft or something, that's very good, but it also will probably bring people not to your user group which like Linux or something. So you should be careful where you host your user group if it's a company, and try to change the location every now and then if you're at a company. And last point I want to make is, don't spend the money you don't have. There's a lot of companies promising a lot, especially with marketing, and they all have budgets and it's all nice, but don't spend money which you don't have yet, because not all of those companies will give you the money which they promised. So that's my opinion currently at sponsoring. And in the field of C++ engineers, one of the biggest incentives for sponsoring actually is HR and recruiting currently, which is, in my opinion, not the worst, because those companies are not trying to sell something to the audience, which I think is not really a working model. And shortly, a few words on how I can help you. Meeting C++ is, I have an event in the user group section. I have a newsletter where I can mention user groups, and I think I will start to do that again with the next newsletter. My social media reach over Twitter, Facebook, and Google+ has now crossed more than 4,000 in reach. And I do this, as I said, this monthly user group meeting post. Short word about that is that I am now able to do it automatically from Meetup. So if you have a user group on Meetup, I probably already have you in my list, and I have basically, I download the iCall data, and if you're listed, if your meeting is listed at the beginning of a month, you will be automatically in my list. And in any other case, I probably will add you if I know about your user group. And in Germany, I also run the C++ group in Xing, which is about 5,000 members. So for Germany or Austria or Switzerland, I can help you very much with that because I'm able to invite people locally, so I can just give the invitation to your user group meeting to people from your city, which can be easily 70 to 200 people. And I have one new plan. Once a month, I would like to get a community hangout or planning session, just an exchange of knowledge for the community, for user groups running. There is already a chat channel for quite a while at Freenode in the IRC, Internet Relay Chat. Good old times, hashtag meeting CPP. And I probably will also then have a Google Hangout running. That's actually, currently the plan. And I think we will start that at the third Thursday at 17 CET. So people from Europe and from North America will be able to join it. But that date is, subject to change. But I think, next week, Thursday, should be Central European time. The question is what time CET is. So CET is from the time zone where we are currently in, it's 9 hours. So that would be for you. Don't do math on stage. 8. So it's actually UTC +1. And there are not a lot of books on community work, and I think one is really good, and that is this one. It's written by Jon Kalb. He was a Ubuntu community manager for a very long time, and I think he currently is working for the Linux Foundation in a similar position. So I've brought it. And I think I will just pass it to the audience so you can take a quick look at it. And that's basically my talk, my part. And I think I and Jon will take questions at the end, so it's now Jon's part to do his talk.
Thank you very much.
Do you have a Mac dongle?
Pardon me?
Do you have a Mac dongle?
Oh. The right time.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is about your audience, and I think that, having experience in hackerspaces and other meetups like this, very often you have students and amateurs, and it's much harder to reach out to professionals. And I was wondering, what is your audience look like? And if you have like a diverse range of expertise in C++.
Yes, the audience can be very diverse. It can be that to a certain topic, when it's template metaprogramming talk at that evening, maybe only people which are really hardcore C++ people will show up. But if at that evening we do like an introduction into C++ 11 or something, we have a lot of students also. And what I know from Berlin, that in Berlin a lot of talks, even if it's in Germany, are in English, because a lot of people which are expats, which are not from Germany, which are working in Berlin, show up there. And this is also very different from user group to user group, and how you are connected. If there's a university and if you have people involved in your user group from that university, the students know about it. And of course, it's a very good thing to also have an outreach to the student community. And the C++ user group in Dresden, for example, hosts its meetings and in a student club. but I haven't been attending there, so I cannot tell you how many students are showing up at the student cup for the C++ user group.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. I've sent sent a volunteer down to get my bag because it turns out that I don't have my dongle, so I can't actually connect, which is maybe a blessing because the file I have is actually from, as Yen says, we actually did this talk or this panel at C++ Now, and I updated it a little bit, not a whole lot of stuff, and then I corrupted the updated file. So I've got the old file, and we're going to do the old file, but we'll only do the old file if we actually have a dongle to connect to. What I want to talk about, though, is because this is the stuff that is most recent and was the stuff that I hadn't added yet. Excellent. Thank you very much. There we go. Okay. All right. All right, I call this a hijacker's guide to the community, and the reason I call it the hijacker is because my modus operandi has mostly been to find an organization that's already kind of doing what I want to do and hijack it to make it do what I want to do. So I want to talk about what I'd like to do, and so that you understand what my vision is. I want to push C++. I want to talk about standard C++. I like Boost. I like generic programming and value semantics. And I think that as a community, we need to keep focus on adapting to new hardware and environment, because a lot of times we have this kind of old mental model about how the computer works, and that's changing all the time. And if it changed radically and our software just broke, well, that'd be a problem. But what happens is it evolves, and so you need to keep pace with that, and we need to think about that. But my vision about how the community is, I want to be broadly C++ focused. I think that we should be educating ourselves, relying on outside influences like experts writing books and things like that. That's a great supplement, but we need to think about how we're going to educate ourselves. We need to push and challenge each other. I want to be informed by computer science, but I actually want to look at software engineering from the point of view of best practices. And I want to talk about our timing, because I think right now C++ is hot. I think that's partly because of cloud and mobile, where performance is becoming a priority. I think, kind of the 2000s was this awful time for C++. There was no new standard from 98, minor little thing in 2003, but no new standard really from 98 until 11. And at the same time, Java was king, and everybody had these really powerful desktops, and nobody cared about performance, right? And then suddenly we're starting to be interested in the cloud, where, we have all these wonderful machines, and if it's too slow, we throw machines at it, but those machines are running a lot of power, and that power is expensive and a lot of waste heat. So if we could make our machines a little bit more performant, people are now concerned about performance in the cloud. The other thing we're concerned about is performance on little tiny devices that we're all carrying with us. And again, even if the processors get really fast, and they're never fast enough, we're thinking about battery now. So again, we're looking at performance per watt because these are what's driving us. And so now people who used to think, well, you know, these computers are as fast as they need to be. I don't have to worry about hard languages to learn. I can use some easy language that, you know, does a lot of garbage collecting for me and all these kinds of things. And it's not hard. It's not a challenge. But now we're thinking, no, it's worth it because squeezing performance is worth it. The other thing that's gotten people interested is C++ 11 and 14. And right now the committee is just on fire. They're just cranking out new standard right and left. And again, that keeps things exciting. I actually think, in fact, I talked to people who their worldview about C++ was that it would just never change. It was just C++. It was like, you know, electricity. It's just there. You plug into it and you use it, but you don't expect it to ever be any different than it used to be. And now I think that's going away really fast because very soon we're going to have technical specifications all over the place, and it's really going to be interesting and lots of cool stuff to talk about. But talking about community organizing, because we're really talking about volunteer organizations. And I think this is the key observation because this is the basis of being able to hijack, and that is that in a volunteer organization, decisions are made by the ones doing the work. A successful organization, you know, the leadership is going to, of course, delegate things. It's going to say, hey, this is what we need to get done. Why don't you guys figure out how to do it? Maybe they coach. Maybe they say, well, here's how I think it should be done. Here's how you might try it. This is how we did it before. But in general, if you're doing the work, you know, a good volunteer organizer is not going to say, well, you've done it all wrong, redo it all, because that's, you know, that's not going to work. So if you want to have influence, if you think, well, I kind of like this group, but their speakers are never interesting, or the location's bad, or they don't do a good job, well, think about how you can fix that, right? So it's been said that showing up is 80% of success. And in my case, what I believe is that showing up means willing to do the work. So I want to talk about 3 institutions, and before we're done, we'll actually talk about a 4th one, which maybe you guys can figure out which one that one's going to be. So I want to talk about Silicon Valley Code Camp, the Silicon Valley ACCU, and BoostCon. So first of all, let's talk about Code Camp. Code Camp is an unconference of a sort. How many of you have heard that term before? Unconference, right? So the idea with an unconference is that the attendees themselves figure out what the conference is going to be about, what the content is. Code Camp's a little bit more structured than you can imagine an unconference being, in that there are sessions that are decided in advance, but basically anybody who submits a technical session will be accepted. This has been changing a little bit at the Code Camp in Silicon Valley, but we'll talk about that. They are about promoting software development in a very general way. It's lots of different tech talks, even tech talks for kids, all sorts of stuff. Originally, it came out of kind of a Microsoft world. So the original ones were very Microsoft slanted, and in some areas it might still be. I don't know, Silicon Valley, which is the one I know, is not Microsoft slanted at this point. There's so much other stuff going on. It's on the weekend. It's always sometime when people don't have to take off work, and it's always free. And so there's lots of lots of sponsors. And in fact, at Silicon Valley Code Camp, they do a great job of getting sponsors to pay for pizza and everything, so that the entire thing is free for attendees, and it's a really exciting thing. So there's a whole bunch of them all over. The one, of course, that I know about is the Silicon Valley one. The way it's structured, there's 9 sessions. There's 5 on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, and then there's free lunch. And it actually has something that I'd never heard of before, which is called a community sponsorship. And it's like, well, what is that? It's like, you know, and then I looked at these groups and said, these groups can't possibly be giving you money. These groups aren't going to have any money. And then I read the fine print, and it said, okay, if you want to be a community sponsor, you have to, and they had actually just a very few rules about, you have to email 2 emailings to all your members, and you have to put our logo on your website. It's all these things that are very reasonable, and no money changes hands. But what's happening is, on their website, they say, hey, here's a sponsor, so they're promoting you. And on your website, you say, hey, here's an event you can go to. So you're promoting them, and it works out really well. And so I've tried to follow that model a little bit for here, and I want to do a lot more of that. We only had 4 community sponsors this year, but maybe next year we'll have 14 or 20 or 80, whatever, because, you know, I'm not asking for people to give me money, at least not for the community sponsorship. But I actually want to put your sponsor logo on our website because I want people to go to your event, right? And I want you to promote my event, so it's going to work out great. So there's a little bit of a history about it. it's actually kind of upside down in a sense, because I kind of came into it in 2011, and that was my first one in 2011. I hadn't heard of it before, and I heard of it only about 2 weeks before, where my company, somebody sent out this thing and said, hey, here's all these free sessions, and there's over 200 free sessions. And I looked at that and I said, this looks pretty cool. How do I give a session? And so I contacted them, and as I said, this was literally only about 2 weeks before, and they said, oh, I said, I have a session that I've done at work and I'm ready to do it, and they said, oh, sure, we'll give you a room, no problem. And it was a wonderful experience. It's a pretty good crowd, not as savvy as the people who are here. There's a lot of students and younger people, but there were some gray hairs too, and so it was a pretty good crowd overall. It was pretty good. But there was one real complaint I had with Silicon Valley Code Camp, and that was they didn't have any C++ content. My talk was the only real C++ talk in the entire out of 208 sessions, and this is in Silicon Valley where there are literally thousands of C++ programmers, and there's no C++ content. So there's two things you can do. You can give up on it, or if you're like me, say, well, I'm going to change that. And from my point of view, and I had already been doing work at BoostCon before, and I'd done another conference and stuff, and I said, okay, let me get this straight. You're going to organize the venue. You're going to organize all the logistics. You're going to promote it. You're going to do all this stuff, and I get to decide what the content is? What more could I ask for, right? I mean, this is like really exciting to me. And so what I did was I started a track at C++, or at CodeCamp, the C++ track, right? So we actually had, even the first year, we had 11 sessions. We're going to have 11 sessions again this year. So we'll actually have 2 of them will be doubled up because there's only 9. In that case, we had 2 given by BoostCon keynotes, and 5 were given by winners of best sessions. So obviously I was pulling very strongly from my C++ Now connections, but that was meant we had really good quality sessions at the Code Camp. So, and of course I have Silicon Valley ACCU as a sponsor. So I want to talk about ACCU as a community sponsor. So I want to talk about ACCU. It was founded in the UK way back in the 80s. It used to be the Association of C and C++ Users. And then in 2006, they got kind of embarrassed about C++ because they said in the 2000s, C++ was, everybody was Java, right? Or Python, right? So they changed the name from the Association of C, C++ Users to ACCU. It no longer stands for anything. It's just ACCU. That's the name of it. All right. So anyway, they have a couple of publications that are actually pretty interesting, pretty well read. And I would say that they have this conference. It's a pretty interesting and important annual conference. And the UK Python conference started out as just a track of this conference, and then it got big enough and they kind of spun it off on their own conference. They also have local affiliate chapters, and if you're interested at all, they are actually open to setting up new chapters, and they're not going to set you through a whole bunch of hoops, and I've talked to them about it because when I came to Silicon Valley ACCU, it already existed. Again, the hijacker theme, right? Find the organization that's already kind of doing what you want and make it do what you want it to do. Basically, they say, and I asked them, I said, what do you need? Well, you need someone to organize it, somewhere to meet. It's the same kind of things that Yen was talking about earlier, and pretty much the same kinds of advice they were giving. Basically, someone to organize it, ACCU members, but specifically you. But, don't panic. It's not as bad as you think. There's a little bit of time commitment, and there's some interesting stuff. But you'll meet lots of people, and lots of interesting people, and you have fun. Somewhere to meet. Again, Jens went over some of these kinds of things. And one of the things I would say is, and I've had this happen where at the last minute, an organization that was letting us use their facility said, well, we've got a conflict and you can't use it because we have priority, which is, I guess that's fair. It's their facility. If you have a choice between changing the venue and changing the date, change the venue. Because people plan around, this is, I've already negotiated with the family that I can go out on Tuesday nights and go to, club meetings or whatever. And if you say, well, we're going to be on Wednesday, it's like, well, sorry, Wednesday is my wife's night to go and do whatever she's doing or something like that. So if possible, change the venue and not the time. Of course, as Yen said, it's really nice to have some regularity, so it's better if you don't change anything. So you need sufficient membership. this is going to be a different issue in different situations. You know, I'm in Silicon Valley, and we actually have the reverse problem that most people have. There's plenty of software engineers around, plenty of people who are doing C++. In fact, there's so many that they don't feel like they need to seek out, thank you, they need to seek out a club. Generally, you actually have better clubs in situations where people are a little bit lonely and are looking for, you know, somebody to talk to and things like that. If you're in a company where there's, you know, 100 other C++ programmers, you're not just dying to go out tonight and talk to other C++ programmers. It's when you're in a small company and there's not a lot of tech in the world, and then you're saying, hey, I want to talk to other programmers a little bit. So we're working on this. We're trying to, you know, as I say, it's a different problem than most people have, but it's still a challenge for us. Speakers, get the best you can, but they don't have to be professional. Absolutely, you really want to develop your internal talent. And that's what I'm all about. That's why I have lots of forums. So, you know, if you come to any of my events and I see that you're interesting and may have some interesting ideas and may be able to present well, then I'm suddenly starting to talk to you about all these different organizations that I'm part of. And gosh, wouldn't you like to come and speak? So you definitely want to encourage that. But as Jens said, there's other ways to go, even if you don't have a formal speaker. He was talking about CPP quiz, which is like, why didn't I think about doing that? That was, yeah, great. But I have some other stuff that I do, basically when we don't have a speaker. Again, one of the things, you can certainly do lightning talks. It's so much easier. Ask Kate how hard it is to get people to do lightning talks. It's like pulling teeth, isn't it? Yeah, people who, for some reason, they think it's easier to do a 5-minute talk than it is to do an hour talk. Is that true, Kate?
It's the hardest lift there is, and yet I got over 20 people.
So I want to talk to you about how successful this is. I'm maybe getting ahead of myself because I'm going to dive into this a little more. But we have set up in the local group where we have a formal, once a month, we get together, we invite somebody, and we're in Silicon Valley. It's usually not that hard. We get somebody to come and speak, and we will get 50 to 60 people, depending on, a good night. Sometimes it's only 20 to 30. But, and that's very traditional, but somebody in our club, it wasn't actually my idea, he said, I want to do kind of a more informal kind of thing. And so we meet, and that was, the formal meeting is the second Wednesday, the informal meeting is the fourth Wednesday, and we get together it's just a conference room at his company. And the first 3 or 4 times we got about 5 people. And it's like Ian says, you got to keep at it, because what happened was, I don't remember exactly what the meeting was, but I think it was because we convinced the main speaker to come visit the informal meeting 2 weeks later to continue talking about some of his topics in an informal way, answer questions. Suddenly we had 15 people. And since then we've had about 15, sometimes 20 people at this conference room. And it's tough to sell, because they say, well, what's the topic? And we say, we don't have a topic. We just get together. And it's like, what? Well, fortunately, every once in a while somebody will say, well, I've got a few slides on this. So they'll do a lightning talk. A lightning talk, right, it's 5 minutes. We've never had a 5-minute lightning talk at all. We take, somebody's got 3 slides and it takes us, 45 minutes, because we just enjoy the heck out of it. And I say, has Jared done his lightning talk yet? Okay, so I don't want to spoil it, but Jared did a lightning talk for us where, I kid you not, he put up a slide and he barely had any words explaining what he was doing, and suddenly it was like, the guy's over here saying, no, the idea was, what's this going to do? And the other guy's over here is arguing, saying, no, look, how that's declared, it's going to do this. And the other guy's like, no, it's going to do this, it's going to do this. And it was just like, and Jared's just sitting there. And then finally he said, well, okay, let's see. Boom. And there's like, what? And so then they're going back and forth. And he said, okay, what about this one? Absolutely wonderful. It's just amazing. And that's what we have a great give and take in that forum. And so it's really, until you've been there a few times, so he says, well, what's going on? Well, every once in a while we get somebody to say, yeah, I'm going to talk about this. And so, we have a topic. No, show up. It'll be more fun than you can imagine. So there's lots of ways to, you guys know social media, things like that. The Silicon Valley ACCU is actually the guy who does the guy who runs it, the guy who does the official programming. He's a D guy. He does C++, I think, at work, but he's bored by C++. He's interested in D. He's actually written a book on D. He's all about D. He loves to get speakers that aren't C++ speakers, but he's not that motivated overall. And so most of the speakers are people I found. And guess what? Guess what they all have in common? They're C++ speakers. Okay, I already talked about this, that we have the formal and informal. I arranged a sponsorship, so I kind of got the local group sponsoring the track, and the track then promotes the local group. In fact, at our Silicon Valley Code Camp track, we pass out a sign-up list. Thank you. We pass out a sign-up list for people to sign up for the local user group's mailing list while we're at the track. So again, it's and of course at every local meeting, we I always mention, well, we have Code Camp coming up. If it's getting close, I try to encourage people to attend. If it's a little ways away, I try to encourage people to think about preparing a talk. And of course, as it turns out now, I've always got a conference coming up within 6 months. So I've always got things that I'm, promoting. We'll do lots of cross-promoting kinds of things. So I want to talk about BoostCon. I'd been attending BoostCon, but felt like, what we'd really like to have is a mainstream C++ conference. Basically, what I had in mind, although I didn't have exactly this in mind, it was basically a conference like we see right here. And so I was saying, I think BoostCon is too focused on Boost. And in fact, that's why I didn't go the first couple of years, but it was people like Marshall and Nevin, who you may have met, they're both here. They told me, no, it's not just about Boost, it's about C++. It's just, the Boost community, because we're very interested in C++, and the talks aren't restricted to Boost. And so I said, okay, let me go. And I went a couple of years, and I said, this is really cool, but I think there needs to be a mainstream C++ conference, and there isn't one because SD West had kind of given up the ghost. And so I said, BoostCon is the closest thing to it. So let's make BoostCon, did I mention the hijacking idea? Let's make BoostCon into the conference I want, because BoostCon isn't the conference I want, but it's really close. So I made this proposal in 2011. I actually said, look, I want a new name that has C++ in it. I want to add another track. BoostCon used to be a 2-track. It started out, it was supposed to be developers and users, but that kind of went away really quickly because talks didn't really fall into those nice, neat categories. And so it was just, we're going to have 2 tracks worth of cool talks. And I said, we need a 3rd track. We need to have a tutorial track. Because this was in 2011 then, the standard actually hadn't come out then, but we knew it was going to come out that fall. And I said, by next year, everybody's going to want to know about C++ 11. Let's have a tutorial track specifically on C++ 11, and let's get a lot of new attendees. So Dave Abrahams, who founded BoostCon and was the chair of BoostCon, he said, that's an interesting idea. Why don't you propose it to the meeting? And so just like this year, Thursday night, there's going to be a planning meeting. At BoostCon, every Thursday night, there's a planning meeting. In fact, if you ever go to C++ Now, you're going to see a lot of similarities in structure between that conference and this conference. Wow. So Thursday night, there was the meeting, and I stood up in front of everybody and said, here's what I'd like to see. And I told them this. And the committee liked the idea. They said, let's do it. So it was actually a few months later that Dave contacted me and said, John, I want you to be the co-chair this year. And I said, wow. That's a lot more than I had bargained for, but I realized then that if this tutorial track was going to come together, somebody had to run it. Somebody had to be the guy that would do it, and that's what I did. Is I kind of, drew it all out and said, okay, we would need a talk on this, and a talk on concurrency, and a talk on lambdas, and a talk on library stuff, and I actually went out and recruited Howard to come and do 3 of our talks, and anyway, so in 2003. We had a new name, C++ Now, which was, by the way, it wasn't my name. I had a different name in mind, but this is what the attendees wanted. We went to 3 tracks, including this new tutorial track. We also had 3 keynotes, because the only way I could get Howard to do 3 sessions was if I got him as a keynote. So we got him as a keynote. We had more attendees. We went from 85 the last BoostCon to 135, and then we had that. What I think was the best content in 2011 on C++ 11. Well, actually, it was in 2012 at the time. I guess it was the next year. And then in 2013, we sold out. We said we'll never have more than 150 attendees. BoostCon had never had more than 100. We said they never hit that limit, but they'd never had more than 100. But we had picked an arbitrary size of 150 because that was basically what a facility could take, and we sold out. So the next year, I went to the conference with the idea, let's grow this conference. And this is where the hitchhiking kind of fails, because you know what? Sometimes there's no ride where you want to go. And I had envisioned, as I said, I wanted BoostCon to get bigger and become a mainstream conference. But the steering committee, which I'm part of, I chair the steering committee, and I said, okay, here's how we're going to do it. Because there were physical limitations, but the Aspen Institute is right next door. We can use some of their space, and we can do this. And, you know, I love planning these things, figuring out how we're going to make this work in a facility that's not perfect for us. Thank you. Still make it work. How do you do that? And I had all these great ideas, but the steering committee, some of them were thinking that was pretty cool, but some of them are also saying, no, there's problems. First of all, you're really straining the physical environment, but also, this isn't what this conference is meant to be. We like it small, which is one thing, but we also need a place for really, advanced cutting-edge library developers. And many of the people who were attending were not that, because we had made it a little more mainstream, and so some of the people were just so hungry for a mainstream C++ conference that they were coming to this one even though it wasn't the perfect fit. And they would say, yeah, a lot of the sessions are over my head, but I'm okay with that because there's so much other good stuff going on, and hey, who doesn't like to be around a lot of really smart people? And so it's an exciting conference. So I was really kind of bummed out, and I went to the Thursday night meeting. We have the steering committee meeting before the Thursday night meeting, and I said, I had all these cool plans to grow the conference, but the steering committee didn't buy into it. And one of the arguments was, I said, there's a lot of people who want to be here. We sold out. There's a lot of people who want to be here. And I didn't mention this, but the content we had, the 3 tracks, we could have easily had another track because of the number of submissions that we had. I said, there's people who want to present. There's people who want to be attendees. Let's grow the conference. And the attitude was no. And one of the things that was said is, suppose we added 50 more people, which would be a lot for that venue. Does that really address the problem? Are there only 50 more people who want to be here? No, it doesn't do it. And that's why I realized, you know what? It has to be a new conference. And because I'm busy doing this, it'll have to be somebody else's thing. And that's too bad because I wanted to see that conference take off and I wanted to help it grow. And so on the Thursday night meeting, I said, hey, here's the deal. We're not going to grow this conference. It's 150. And the steering committee said it would have to be a different conference to address that. It'd have to be a mainstream. And the audience was cool. It's like, what kind of conference would it be? Well, where would it be? And I said, well, I don't know. Somebody else will have to make those decisions because I can't really be part of that. But it was really clearly a popular idea. Everybody wanted to talk about it. So we had to plan next year's conference, but everybody was also talking about this other conference that didn't exist and didn't have any. So afterwards, Chandler came up to me and he said, well, if you really want to do this conference, then the organization you want to do it with is the Standard C++ Foundation. I said, wait a minute, Chandler, were you not listening? I don't want to do this conference. Well, here we are. If you want to know more about that Thursday, I'm out of time, so Thursday night we'll talk about that. I do want to talk about lessons learned. The first lesson is you have the answer. What is the answer? Come on, guys, what is the answer? All right. No, seriously. The answer is, in a voluntary organization, decisions are made by the people doing the work. If you show up to do the work, you're going to have influence. If you like this conference, but you say, you know what's wrong with this conference? There wasn't enough of whatever, then you help me make sure there's enough of whatever. Don't come to me. Actually, I don't know if you know Nevin. Nevin sent me this thing. He wanted to change his t-shirt size. I said, do you think people are going to be upset that we ask for t-shirt sizes, but there's no t-shirts? He said, I think, yeah, they might be mildly upset, but I don't think it's a big deal. I said, well, the problem was, the reason I asked was because I was hoping to get a sponsor and we would need the sizes. And now we have a bunch of sizes, so next year we could do t-shirts and we'd know the sizes, and that's good. And then he said, okay, so what you should have done is you should have sold t-shirts with registration, people wanted them. And then if you get a sponsor, you could actually, on the first night, you could write everybody checks, and it would be cool to hand out checks as refunds for the people who had bought the shirts. And you know what I said? I said, Nevin, thank you very much for volunteering to run our t-shirt program next year. And that's how you need to, right? Anyway, if you don't like something about the conference, sure, come talk to me about it. But you're saying, John, it isn't enough like this, and I'm hearing, John, I'd like to help you fix that. So, don't try to take it on yourself. Look for people like Kate, who you can shove a lot of the work on. Find the people that share your vision. That's what I meant to say. Don't panic. Sometime when we're not being recorded, you come by and ask me what happened last night and why I panicked, but why I didn't panic. It was kind of a fun exercise. Anyway, so I think I'm out of time. Am I out of time?
You got 20 seconds.
I got 20 seconds. Who's got the fastest question in the world? Anyway, come by and talk to Jens or I at any point, and please come to the Thursday night meeting if you're at all interested in community organizing, because I'm going to con you into helping me. I mean, I'm going to invite you to help us out on Thursday night. So thank you very much. It was fun to go through my slides, even if they were the older slides. Thanks a lot, guys.